Good evening and welcome to a special edition of the People's Choice here on WCEG Talk Radio, the Worldwide Community Empowerment Group, the Worldwide Community Empowerment Network. I'm your host, Joe Flint, all one word, like a tribe called Quest, here on the People's Choice. Ladies and gentlemen, we're very pleased and excited tonight that we have one of the foremost minds of our country, if you will, on the live with us tonight to discuss with us about nonviolence and about the work of the women's movement and just about an array of things that take place from the perspective of, oddly enough, women. You know, we don't always give enough credit, if you will, to what the work that women are doing in the background sometimes, or for that matter, in the forefront in our communities. You know, you may every now and again see, something that a woman started in an organization or she did this or that or the other. But very seldom do you see the work of it being on a national scale. We see here in Georgia and in the Atlanta area, we see a lot of organizations, but on a national scale, we sometimes don't get to see it. And so we're blessed tonight to have Dr. Myers on from Black Women for Positive Change.org, or Black Women for Positive Change organization, who's going to discuss with us some of the background of the organization, as well as her background and what they have working in the days, weeks, and months ahead. So good evening, Dr. Myers, and thank you so very much for joining us here on the People's Choice on WCEG Network.
Well, thank you, Reverend Flint. It's my pleasure to be your guest. Thank you.
Thank you so very much. I know that, when reading your background, I mean, the thing that just threw me to the moon was the presidential appointee. You know, I've encountered a lot of people in my life who've shook hands with, former presidents, but I don't think that I have ever met a presidential appointee. I think that is far more impressive than meeting the actual president. To know that he or she, in this world that we live in now, but to know that a president thought enough of an individual to appoint them to serve in a particular position. So if you will, Dr. Myers, just give us a little background about yourself and about the presidential appointee.
Well, I've always been a civic activist, and I was very active in the Black Power movement when I was in school and on campus. I became very involved in local democratic politics. And we had a governor in California that I didn't think was paying enough attention to Black issues. Yeah. And so I started writing him letters. His name was Ronald Reagan. And I met him through my graduate work. And I told him, you're not doing enough to help Black people. Yeah. So when he got elected to be president, I was asked if I would come and fulfill some of what I was interested in. So I came to Washington, D.C., along with a lot of Californians at that time, to set up different initiatives. And I was very proud, as I served as Assistant Secretary for Public Affairs, to help create the Office of Minority Health. And that office has been there for 35 years. And this was an office that needed to focus on health disparities and to focus on the issues that Black people and brown people face when they're dealing with health. And then following that job, I became director of the Office of Commercial Space Transportation, and that's privately owned rocket ships. Yeah. So I had the opportunity to work with aerospace, to work with institutions, to travel around the world, and to explain to people that commercialization of space was in the future. Yes. And now we see it with Elon Musk and SpaceX and all the different things that are happening. So it was my pleasure to authorize the first commercial launch of a satellite as a part of that activity. But then in 2008, President Obama announced that he was running for president. So that was it for me. I said, okay, let's get it going. So I helped to create Black Women for Obama. And we also had Black Women for Biden-Harris. And so I really believe in supporting those initiatives where you can get something done. Right. And my father used to always tell me it's important to try to have a seat at the table. And if you can find someone who will give you that seat at the table and let you make decisions, then consider taking advantage of that.
Dr. Myers, just immediately impressed by that. Of course, I read, your bio and seeing of those things. And, to your point, maybe when you were traveling about space or commercial space, travel or exploration, it was not as popular. But needless to say, we definitely see it now. So I want to ask you a question about that real quickly. Was that still during the time of President Reagan's term in office?
It was actually President Bush 1. It was after Reagan was done and the Bush administration, and they invited me to stay on. I guess I'd done an okay job. Part of my job was to handle the Just Say No to Drugs campaign when I was at Health and Human Services. Hopefully you remember that.
Yes,
we wanted everyone to know what Just Say No means. We wish they knew what it meant today. But at that point, it was a big effort.
Yes.
And so it was under that administration, that the commercial space. And you're right, there was a lot of resistance to commercial space. NASA was not real excited about it at the time because they wanted space to be the province of the government, because there's so much national security involved. When you have rockets going into low Earth orbit and you have people in space. But in our lifetime, Reverend Flint, we're going to see people actually having hotels in space, apartments in space. We're going to see malls. I really believe that there will be in low Earth orbit a commercialization and a development where people will be able to go up to a hotel for space for, like they go on a cruise for a week. You'll have the opportunity. I may not go, but my kids or grandkids, they may have the opportunity to do it. So it's a whole new world.
Well, Dr. Myers, I'll tell you one thing that is surprising, not that you've said anything about your age, but when you said that Reagan was governor, I was like, wow, I didn't think that Dr. Myers was of the age to have had Reagan as governor during that time, as I love presidential history. So I know the time frame that he was in there. I said, no, not Dr. Myers. But no, thank you so much for that work that you've done to bring us, to where we are today. And the reason I asked was Reagan still president, because I know that he was very big on space and things of that nature during that time. So that's what I was wondering. So tell us about the Black Women for Positive Change organization. How did this come about?
Well, we started off in 2008 when President Obama announced his run for office. And so we started Black Women for Obama, and we worked as a part of the campaign, doing the precinct walking and being very involved and doing everything. And we were so thrilled and proud when he won. And we supported his reelection as well. And after he was reelected in 2012, we then realized that we could either stay together or stop. So we decided to stay. And let me say that Black Women for Positive Change is our name, but we have men who belong to our group who are our good brothers, and they're full members. We also are multicultural, and we have people from all backgrounds. And when we talked about changing our name, some of our non-Black people said, no, we want to belong to a Black organization. This is the first opportunity we've had. We're also very intergenerational with baby boomers like myself, X generation, which I assume you are, and millennials and Gen Zs. We have a very big part of that. And we're also interfaith with Christians, Muslims, and Jews, Buddhists, Hindus. We really believe in our organization being a collaborative opportunity for us to work together, because that's what America is supposed to be. We're supposed to be able to believe in what we believe, but also respect and interact with people who see things a little differently, but we can still all come together for common goals.
Absolutely. I love that. So can you tell us about the nonviolence campaign that you have going on right now?
Yes. When we first started our group, our goal was actually to create opportunities and pathways to success. We wanted to be an economic development organization. And that was our first goal, to strengthen and expand the middle class and the working class. But then Trayvon Martin got killed, and we were traumatized like everyone was. And it caused us to pay more attention to some of this violence that was going on in the country. We knew about it. I mean, we've known about it forever, but it was just something that just hit us. So we decided we cannot promote success and opportunities if our children are being killed going to a convenience store to get a cold drink. So we decided to make a second goal. And our second goal is to change the culture of violence in America and the world. And that is what we are dedicated to. So we started off with a day of nonviolence, then we expanded to a week, and now we have a month of nonviolence. But the issue of changing the culture is the real essence of what we're dedicated to, because America was born into violence. You know, the Native Americans were committed genocide against the Native Americans.
Right.
Our ancestors, African people, brought over here in slavery. That was a totally violent institution for hundreds of years. And then we even had white indentures that came to America who were let out of prisons from England and Scotland and Ireland. And you always hear that Australia was the first penal colony. That's not true. America was the first place that prisoners were brought over here, and they brought them over here to be overseers and slave catchers and wardens. More and more violence. So we have to get people in touch with the fact that the way that the country began is not the way that we have to go. We have to change this culture of violence. We see it in movies. Unfortunately, our rappers use far too much violence in their lyrics. Our films are violent, our TV shows. All of this has to be put into balance so that we can see other ways that people come together.
You know, it's interesting when you mention, you know, in movies and in theaters and even in rap or in music itself, when you mention rap, I think about, you know, right here in Atlanta where violence is, or in the metro Atlanta area where violence is at, I mean, its highest peak than I've ever known in my life of being a native here. I haven't lived here all my life, but I was born and raised here. But, you know, in the time that I was away and have been back in the metro area, it's just amazing to me to see just how over the top violence has become, and so much to the point where people are imitating what is being said in the rap music or in the music in and of itself. And what I have learned or what I've come to know is that most of the rappers or whoever they are, don't even live the lives that they rap about, but they make it sound so, you know, I don't know, big and lavish that people literally go out here and imitate these things. And it's unfortunate because it's on the radio, it's on the television. It's kind of hard not to see it. You know, in speaking in conversations are just about other things that, you know, your children are being, or our children are being roped into because of society. It's unfortunate that there was a time in which you could shield them from certain things, but now you can't shield them from anything because it's, again, on the radio, it's on the television, and literally, I mean, you can go to a gas station anywhere in Atlanta and almost see it live happening, you know, on a regular basis. So violence is just really at its highest peak around the world. But, you know, I know specifically here in Atlanta, it's at a high rate, and it's becoming uncontrollable that you can't even walk, you know, get gas in your car without, you know, watching somebody either being mugged or somebody trying to steal your car. As a matter of fact, I just saw earlier today that there was a shooting at Clark, Atlanta last night. Now, I didn't get all of the information on it, but there was a shooting while they were out celebrating last night. It was just an unfortunate thing.
Well, that's what has to be changed. We have allowed violence to become normalized. And we have to get our faith leaders, our educators, our business executives, everyone's got to come together and say, look, this does not have to be our culture. We have to change. Now, America has demonstrated that it can change because our ancestors went from enslavement to freedom. We're not as free as we want to be with all the challenges we're being faced with right now. But overall, we went from being in bondage and chains to being able to go where we wish. We've also seen women go from the kitchen, where they were working only at home as domestics and moms and taking care of the family, which was great. And that's still very important. But now you see women in the US Senate, Kamala Harris as vice president. You see women as CEOs. So America has shown that it can change. It can go from one condition to another, but we have to focus on it. And right now, there are far too many guns coming into our community. Young people, do you know that most of the young people that are shot with a weapon that came out of their own home?
Yes.
The parents didn't lock it up. The parents let the kids figure out how to get to the gun. But that's inexcusable. We can't have that. So we really must mobilize our institutions. And last week, your colleague, Penny, was a part of our faith call that we had. We had 50 faith leaders who came together in prayer to talk about changing this culture. And also we have events going during the month of nonviolence.
I saw that.
Families, voting rights and opportunities, we have events going on all over the country where we're asking people, if we're going to change this, you have to take responsibility. Right. You can't look to the government. You can't look to the mayor. You can't look to the police chief. We have to take responsibility for making this change. So that is what we're doing.
I love that. So I notice in your background, you have this wonderful poster of Midterm Matters. And you have the beloved John Lewis there.
That's right.
You have the beloved John Lewis. So how active or how much of a push is Black Women's Positive Change or Black Women for Positive Change organization involved in the midterm elections or in the elections as a whole right now? Of course, I know the organization was started out of an election, if you will, but how active are you all in the political realm or election and voter rights at this time?
Right now, we're doing a nonpartisan approach.
Okay.
We are supporting that people vote for who they want to. Vote Democrat, vote Republican, vote Green Party, vote Independent. We just want people to turn out and vote. And we're very involved. We've partnered with the Transformative Justice Coalition, which is led by attorney Barbara Arnwine. If you haven't had her on your show, you really want to do that. She's really a powerful leader.
I want that connection then, Dr. Myers.
Well, you got it. She has put together a coalition of a votercade that started 2 weeks ago in Minneapolis, Minnesota. They're going to 26 cities with a huge bus, and they're traveling from, they started in Minneapolis, they've been to Milwaukee, they've been to Philadelphia, to Detroit. They were in Washington, D.C. on Saturday, and members of our organization were in the votercade, driving down the streets, blowing the horns, waving signs, telling people register to vote and get out and vote. This midterm election is critical. Right. It's certainly a powerful election in the state of Georgia. You really have something going down there. Right. And we have to get people off of these couches. They've got to stop the binge watching. They've got to get out of the house, get out of the house and either mail that ballot or go to the polls. Because midterms, people have a tendency to think that the only election that's important is the presidential.
Right.
Well, that's not the case, because you must realize that the person that's running for mayor is going to choose the police chief. Right. And that police chief is either going to be aware of racial bias or he's going to be pro-violence against our young people and our men and our women. That mayor makes that decision. You elect someone who's going to choose the superintendent of schools. That determines, is Black history going to be taught, or are all the books going to be ripped out of the school and thrown away if they talk about Black history or issues that they call critical race theory?
Right.
We vote for people who are the governors, and they appoint judges in the state. They appoint the people who are going to sit there. If you're a young person, or if you or if I get into a legal fight and we have to go to court, that judge and that jury determine what's going to happen. Right. And so often our young Black people are given sentences 2 and 3 times more severe than another community would experience. Right. So we have to look at these things as decisions. We want to choose the people who make the decisions that affect our lives.
That's so critical. And a statement that you made a little while ago was probably the most profound statement that I've heard from any organization, especially from a, if you will, Black organization. Very seldom do you hear Black organizations make the statement nonpartisan voting. You know, they'll that's kind of the crutch, but no one ever says it. So I was very glad to hear you say that we're focusing on nonpartisan voting. Just
absolutely
vote.
Now you can vote for who you want to.
Absolutely.
Everyone has that choice, but in terms of turning out the vote, we just want the people to come to the polls.
Right. And I say that because, you know, in my life, growing up here, you know, Atlanta is civil rights Mecca. So, you know, in working with a lot of the organizations, specifically, you know, African-American organizations, many of them will say that, but that's not always what's meant behind it. So I thank you for actually making that known. And that speaks volumes to your character, but also to the organization as a whole, because we don't live in Black America. We don't live in white America. We live in America. There are, of course, issues that affect each, race, each gender of people on a regular basis, but the goal is for us all to be that one melting pot that we talk about. The goal is for us to push forward. And to your point earlier, we have seen America make change, and we know that America can do it. So as Americans, it is up to us to make that change work for us.
Absolutely. And I know that the idea of us having to advocate to white people is something that's a turnoff for a lot of people. Yeah. But we must realize that there were tens of thousands of indentured servants who came to America. Right. Some of them were convicts that were sent here. Others came on their own and worked for 7 years as indentured servants, and then they were given land grants. Correct. But a lot of the descendants of the indentures made up the trailer park community that is often kind of put down and denigrated. Right. People talk about trailer trash, and they talk about the negative comments that they make about people who are poor. Well, we have to let these white poor people, and Dr. Martin Luther King, he said this years ago with the Poor People's Campaign. Yes, yes. We have to make sure that they understand they're being used by the great power structure. They're being told, you're white, and so you're better than them. Right. You're white, so you've got to keep these Black people and these brown people down. Right. They are confused, and they need to realize that their advancement is tied to our advancement.
Correct.
As there's improvement for health, like President Obama, First Lady Obama put that Affordable Care Act into place for health, that went across the board. Absolutely. It helps all families. Absolutely. So this is something that, we don't like to think that we have to go out and educate other communities and teach them their history, but we really do, because they've been used and manipulated against us. And as our community progresses, they're jealous and envious. Yes. They see our Black working class, middle class prospering. Well, that's what we're supposed to do in America, is prosper. That's why immigrants come here, to prosper.
That's exactly right. You mentioned in your comments about, the progress of America and of course the progress of, races and genders and so on and so forth. And I asked you when we were off camera, had you had an opportunity to view the series entitled First Ladies? And I'm not sure if our viewers are familiar with it, but it chronicles the presidential time of FDR and his wife, Eleanor Roosevelt, as well as Gerald Ford and his wife, Betty Ford, and President Barack Obama and his wife, Michelle Obama. And the one thing that I noticed, once my mind wrapped around the fact why they chose these individuals as opposed to other women, who have been, first ladies, and it dawned on me was that their leadership style and their ability not to conform to the role, if you will, of just being, a Stedford wife or just being a pretty lady to sit, next or be seen by her husband. But all three of these women, specifically starting with Eleanor Roosevelt, was very vocal about women's rights and about, the ability to show that you're educated as a woman and that you are, you have just as much power and say as a man. And moving on to, Betty Ford and her ability to not to be silenced, in office, and how she was always speaking about things that affected her as a woman and as a mother and as a wife. And then, of course, Michelle Obama showing how, she was generalized, just in a role of, well, she showed, in the video how she was generalized, as a role of just being a housewife, but or just having some legal background, but then her personal experiences of her father being ill is what got her into the health profession and the health field to begin with. And I was of the belief that she had only done legal work prior to coming to the White House, but I learned that she was actually helping or working at a hospital there in the South Side of Chicago. So I say all that to say it shows the power of a woman.
Yes.
In the forefront, and I hate to say the word background, but in the forefront of all things that, this patriarchal society will have you to believe that men are so in charge, but none of those presidents would have been successful without the support and the love and the help of their women. So
absolutely. And I don't know if people realize that President Obama came to Michelle Obama's law firm, and he was actually an intern, or he was doing an apprenticeship as a part of the law firm. And when he met her, he got so impressed. I think he dropped the internship so that they could date. But she was a partner in that law firm when he came there. And so that says a lot about their relationship and how it began. I think that the whole example that they showed with the girls, their two daughters, and I thought it was just really magnificent the way that her mother was able to be a part and to be a mentor to the girls in the White House with him there, and with the two of them. They showed the Black family model and how that works. And Michelle was always mentioning her dad. So even though he wasn't with her physically anymore, he was still, his spirit was still operating in part of that family. Tremendous role models, tremendous.
Absolutely. And I love to that point about how she continued to mention her father, because there's this misconception that Black fathers aren't there and that they don't matter as much. But she always mentioned him and showed the importance of him in her life. So that's very good.
Well, absolutely. I'm a woman who has been blessed with incredible role models. My father was an incredible role model. He was in World War II and in the military, in the Army, and he taught me so much. I had a first cousin who was incredible. They call him the father of Black psychology, Dr. Joseph White, and he helped create the whole concepts of Black psychology that we live with today. And then my husband, when I was deciding what job to take in one of the presidential positions, he's the one who told me to go into commercial space. And I didn't know anything about aerospace, but he said, look, if you're a good manager, you can manage anything. So he had vision and supported me in that and traveled the world with me as we went around to promote private ownership of private rocket ships. So Black men are incredible role models. I've been blessed with having had at least those three and many more.
Yes.
And that's something that we really push for in Black Women for Positive Change, working with our good brothers, recognizing that mentorship is so critical. For example, during our month of nonviolence, we've had events all over the country, and they're still going on. And we had a recent event called a Gen Z Summit. And it was coordinated out of California, but it had people from all over the country. And one of the Gen Zs from Birmingham, Alabama, was talking about how she wishes she had a mentor. She wishes she had an adult that she could trust, that she could go talk to, and that her parents were kind of old school, and they kind of just wanted you to go sit down and shut up, go do what I tell you to do, and spank them a lot when they were children. And she was saying, there's an absence of role models that she had in her life. And that's something we need to address.
Role models, when I look back over my life, and I think, I sound like the thing, and I think things over, but when I examine, where I've come to in life, I realized that it was because of positive role models. My mother was a single mother. My father was there. Of course, I can call and see him and visit with him anytime I wanted, but technically my mother was a single mother. But the one thing that she always did was, one, she took me to church. And in doing so, she always made sure that I was around positive people who could influence my life. And it's funny because even to this day, she'll say, when we're somewhere doing something, and she'll say, I have no idea how he knows all of these people, or how he came in contact with these people. And I have to remind her, it's really because of you, because you took me to these events. Of course, now I don't know strangers. I'm going to make myself to know everybody. But it was because you took me and put me in the arena that allowed me to have positive role models. So tell me, Dr. Myers, about your faith-based branch, if you will, of Black Women for Positive Change. What's the type of work that you all are doing with the faith-based community?
Well, when we first started our first day of nonviolence, we had it at a church, Metropolitan AME Church in Washington, D.C. So we started right out. Reverend William Lamar is one of the honorary co-chairs of the month of nonviolence. Rabbi Jeffrey Myers from the Tree of Life Synagogue in Pittsburgh, where they had a mass shooting 5 years ago. He is one of our co-chairs. And so we work closely with our religious leaders, Imam Talib Sharif, who's head of the nation's mosque here in Washington, D.C.
Okay.
He is one of our faith leaders. Our chaplain is Reverend Dr. Barbara Reynolds, and she's very special in the city of Atlanta because she wrote the biography of Coretta Scott King.
Right.
And Reverend Reynolds is just a tremendous leader. She led that prayer call we had last week where we had 50 faith leaders. And one of the things we've been doing with our faith leaders is we have been asking them to reach out to their congregation. And I'm going to ask this right now of everyone who's listening to this show and watching. We have a pledge card. It's called the John Lewis Good Trouble Voting Rights Pledge Card. And people can go to our website, blackwomenforpositivechange.org, and online, they can pledge to vote. They can promise that they're going to vote. We want people to say they're going to vote, and they're also going to get 10 family members, neighbors, co-workers out to the polls.
Right.
So I invite everyone listening, ministers, congregation members, go and sign the pledge card. Now we have a contest going on that the person who gets the most people to sign the voting rights pledge cards can win an Air Jordan gift card, buy a new pair of sneakers of Air Jordans. So if you, Reverend Flint, if you can get 50 people or 60 people in your church to go online and sign the pledge card and have them put your name as the referral, then, hey, maybe we can send you a gift at the end of the process after the election day.
I might wear those on Sunday morning if I can get them.
Well, there you go. There you go. And so we're trying to find ways to incentivize people to go and promise to vote and then get out and vote. So that's a partnership we have with our faith leaders working on the pledge cards.
Can you tell us that site again? Please tell us. Yes.
blackwomenforpositivechange.org. That's where the pledge card is. We have two sites that we promote. One is the monthofnonviolence.org, the monthofnonviolence.org, and blackwomenforpositivechange.org. You can go to both of those websites. Now, the Month of Nonviolence site is where we have all the events showcased that are going on. Votercades, for example, people listening to this show who might be in Norfolk, Virginia, there will be a votercade there, and we hope you'll get involved. We have events happening. Birmingham, Alabama is going to have an event where they're going to march against violence on October 21st. It's called the Stop the Violence Walk.
Yes.
We have other events. In fact, tomorrow, there's going to be an event about domestic violence. And that's a very tragic and sad thing that happens. But if people go to our website, they can see the flyer and how to get onto that call, because we have to, so much violence starts at home. It starts at the kitchen table. It starts in the bedroom, in the backyard. Those are issues that we need our faith leaders and our family members to realize that violence was handed down. It was handed down during slavery. And a lot of times people don't even realize when they're yelling and screaming at somebody and grabbing someone because they saw their father do it. They saw their uncle do it. Well, we don't want to repeat those behaviors. We have to change those kinds of cultural behaviors. So that's what we talk about at our events. We have a film screening in Baltimore, which will be October 22nd. And people can go back to the website, blackwomenforpositivechange.org, and click on the link that says media. And you will see some films that we produced that you can show to your congregation or show to the young people. They're violence prevention films. Nice. We wrote the script, we raised the money, we hired the film crew. And one of the really great films is called On Second Thought. We're trying to say to young people, when you get angry, stop, have a second thought. Don't just run out there. And so these are some of the tools that we're trying to make available.
I love that, Dr. Myers, that, it's not just a campaign, but it has tangible resources that can be used to help, people of all walks of life and all generations to help, because as you said, violence is one of those things. It's the same thing as hate. Hate is a taught thing, and unfortunately, violence is kind of the same thing. And we don't realize that we didn't gather this or get this or come into this violent issue until we actually look back over our lives and see that maybe somewhere along the way we saw this happen in our home or in someone else's home. And it's kind of one of those things. Hate begets hate. Even violence can sometimes beget violence if it's not addressed. And what I've seen, Dr. Myers, especially in the younger generation millennials, is that it's almost kind of celebrated in some areas that they celebrate this type of rhetoric of being grabbed and being manhandled, on a regular basis. And it's so unfortunate, because to the point we realize that this is something that they've seen, and they've seen it on a level that they believe it's normal.
That's right.
I think about, and of course I wouldn't mention, but I had a classmate years ago who was in an abusive relationship, and they had sons, and I can remember having the conversation with the individual saying, what are you going to tell your sons, when they get older? And I wasn't advocating, leaving her husband, but how do you continue to explain to your sons, that this is happening? And then when they become adults, and what would be your response to their wives or girlfriends, who may experience the same thing? So it's kind of one of those things that, in our community, in the Black community, is one of those, what happens in my house stays in my house. And,
right.
and you don't discuss these things. And so we have to be more vocal because there are a lot of people who need help, and not just in our community, but in general, there are a lot of people who need the help and are afraid to speak out about it because they're afraid of being hurt, and they don't have an outlet, or they don't have the resources that you all are providing.
And oftentimes they're ostracized.
Yes,
we had someone on a panel last year whose mother had been abused her entire life. Wow. And she said she used to hide in the bedroom when her father would come home, and she could tell by his tone of voice whether he was going to be angry that day. Yeah. But he was a minister.
Oh, wow. Wow. Wow.
And then they also found that the church that he was a pastor at, the other pastors knew what was going on, but they didn't say anything.
Dr. Myers, believe it or not, and it's sad, and I hate to speak that of my colleagues, but it happens more often than ever. And not only in that community, but there are a lot of leaders, if you will, who portray these wonderful households, but it's kind of the same thing. But definitely I've seen it or have known it to happen even in the faith-based community.
Well, we have to find a way that people can get past feeling like what's in the house stays in the house kind of mentality, because anger management is real. And people don't realize that if they allow their bodies to go through that emotional rage over and over again, they have a heart attack and die at the age of 55. They're just gone. Right. Why not stick around? My grandmother made it to 106 years old. My God. My husband and I just celebrated my mother's 99th birthday 2 weeks ago in Los Angeles. Yes. We can live long lives, but we have to take care of our bodies, take care of our minds, take care of our emotions. And violence is the opposite of that. Right. So if a person loves themselves, then they've got to take care of their own bodies. Anger management, conflict resolution, de-escalation. These are all methodologies that work. You're a former military man, so you know about all these things. Oh, yes. But a lot of people don't know. When you have someone who's angry and getting ready to be violent, there's a tone of voice and body language that people can use to try to bring them down. Correct. And this is something we all need to learn how to do. Correct. And one of our partners, Congresswoman Gwen Moore, she's from Milwaukee, Wisconsin. She wrote a bill. We helped her write the bill, the National De-Escalation of Violence Act. It's gone nowhere. It barely can get out of committee. Now, here we're trying to get $500 million in grants that can go to communities to teach people how to de-escalate.
Right.
Teach teachers, moms, dads, grocery store managers, wherever people may encounter violence. You said at the gas stations, you see people coming together. Okay, we need the gas station attendants to know how to de-escalate. It may be that they turn on some music and calm people down, but we need to pull together to get this legislation passed, because